Hello and welcome back. MC1 Gamer here, bringing you, yes, another unlocking Age of Sigmar video. I am just recovering from knee surgery. I used to be a contender in Age of Sigmar tournaments, but then I took an arrow to the knee. So, bottom line here is this: I'm going to be running as many as I can through the holiday weekend here, and today I have on Paul Conti to talk about Free Peoples, his absolute love. Paul, thank you for joining us today.
Hey, what's up, nerds? How's it going? Glad to be here. We've got so much to talk about with the Free People. Holy crap.
Yeah, there's been a lot of things that have been happening. Let's first talk about some of the big changes. You actually put out a couple of videos, and I'm putting your link for your channel in the notes below. Oh, I also want to say, so I don't forget, Star Mini Gaming, James and Paul, you guys put together Tactica Tuesdays, most Tuesdays, and please, everybody, check that out as well. That's how you can find Paul. So, tell me, what's new? What's different with Free Peoples with all the big changes that have happened with the new General's Handbook?
I think the biggest change to look at, first of all, was actually not even directly with the General's Handbook. It was with the Compendium release that came out with the General's Handbook.
Yeah, let's all pour one out for the lost Compendium scroll.
Yeah. Pour one out for the loss. Yeah, Free People lost more than 30 war scrolls with the Free People keyword.
Yeah. How do you feel about that?
Some of them were big hits. I mean, it really completely changed like the competitive list that I was playing. Like, that list doesn't work anymore. In fact, the battalion that I was running, the Brotherhood of Knights, doesn't even exist. It doesn't have points anywhere anymore. So that said, though, like, there were some things that were getting play. Like the Grail Knights were great. I was using the Empire Knights pretty regularly. Bretonnian Trebuchets were solid. The Bretonnian Lord on a Pegasus was really good. Yeah, the Empire cannons were fantastic, but like, apart from that, like, half dozen out of these 30 plus war scrolls that we lost were getting played regularly, and the rest were like garbage. Like, we lost like the Empire Mortar. Who cares? We had like a dozen like unique Empire heroes that nobody ever played. Who cares? So it's a mixed bag of what we lost. There's some strong things that we lost, but the big thing is that we gained really fantastic allegiance abilities. Like, yeah, really good.
Let me just say one thing about the Compendium before we move on and go into that, because I definitely want to go and highlight that. You can still play Compendium scrolls that have points. They still exist.
Yep.
In the Grand Order Alliance. So you can still bring that stuff in. You haven't completely lost all that stuff. Some of the stuff has been a little neutered to the point where it's really not attractive. It's not even that worthwhile. Some is amazing. Yep. Like, for instance, now some of the named characters, like even the Bretonnian General, Leo, King Leo, you could give him allegiance stuff, or not allegiance stuff. You can give him order allegiance stuff and give him artifacts. Yeah. So they're actually even more attractive.
Yes.
So there are some balances, but it is something, people are going to have to just move on from that. There are changes that are being made. Look, if you're not playing a tournament and you're in your local meta, you can do whatever the hell you want. Nobody's going to come and break down your door. There's no rules police. They're going to take away your minis or confiscate them. But for a tournament structure, which is mostly what we're going to be talking about for this show series, or for local games where they try to adhere to a structured points match place, benchmark, then you're just going to have to accept that fact. But like you said, and I want you to we're going to go into that in more detail today, there is plenty that you've gained, and mainly it's focusing around allegiance. I have the pictures of the allegiance stuff. Do you want to give me a little bit more of the, from a high-level view of what you think is going on with Empire, and then we can go take a look at that stuff a little more granularly?
I think what they did is they gave us an allegiance ability that makes Free People play the way they always wanted the Empire to play back in the day. They wanted it to be big blocks of infantry, all working together, kind of in concert, and having supporting units and all of those sorts of things, having this big, like, traditional regimented professional army look. of like all of these guys, all of these coordinated units working together. The detachment rules in 8th edition and prior editions that I feel like nobody ever really played with them the way that they were like intended to be played. But I feel like this now, that's doing what they wanted then. I feel like we're actually going to be using these things and using them to their fullest potential.
Do you think that that this army is going to benefit from the direction that the meta seems to be heading in, which is larger units and having to have more volume to score on some of the scenarios?
Yes, definitely. That's one of the big pluses, is that free people is all about having a lot of bodies on the table now. And a lot of your units, like the great companies, require at least one unit of free guild guard with 20 or more models. So if you're going to run a great company, you're already at that 20-man unit, 20-plus man unit that is going to help you score objectives. I think a lot of lists are going to be running even more than just that, including like, you know, the ones that we're going to go over. I think I included some even larger groups in there. So we want to look at what this thing actually says.
Yeah, let's go do that. I'm going to go do a screen share so that people don't have to look at my wonderful ugly mug. But not you. You're pretty.
I know. I am just too pretty for YouTube.
All right, so let me just go ahead and jump and grab that. Hold on a second. I'm going to do the old infinity thing here that everybody loves. All right. Woo! Yeah, that's right. Special effects, top quality special effects for the for this show. All right, so yes, we're going to first take a look at this. This is all new with the GHB 2017. Why don't we go through this? Why don't you walk through this, and I can go pull up the artifacts afterwards.
Yes. So we basically have two battle traits. One of them, the Defiant Avengers, which is just basically the standard order allegiance battle trait, which it lets you just reroll battle shock tests, which is pretty awesome. And I'm going to talk about a little bit later all of the combos with that are even more awesome. The thing that we were just talking about, the Free Guild Great Companies, you take groups of 3 units, these little triumvirates of units, and one of them has to be a unit of Free Guild Guard with at least 20 models, and then 2 other Free Guild units that have at least 10 models, which means you're probably not taking demigriffs. You can probably take like a 10-man unit of Outriders or Pistoliers if you want to. I don't think I would do that. This is mainly going to be infantry focused.
But it does give you some flex.
It does. It basically, it gives you flexibility to run almost any unit in like the Free Guild list, right? Like out of all of the different things that we have, you know, demigriffs are the only thing that are like, you know, multi-man units, not like single models that you really can't do this with effectively. Although I must say, you technically can run a unit of 12 demigriffs.
there are people out there that have. And let's talk about demigriffs when we get to the War Scrolls themselves. But yeah, come on, in 8th edition, there are people that were running that many. It wasn't common, but I've seen it. I saw battle reports with that many.
Yeah. I mean, I own 12 demigriffs.
Well, good for you, man. All right.
I might have to do this just because.
Just for shits and giggles.
Yeah, exactly. So what does this actually do for you? When at least one of the units in the Great Company is in close combat with your opponent, and another unit from the Great Company is not in close combat with your opponent, and it's within 6 inches of the unit that is in close combat, at the end of your opponent's charge phase, those other units can either charge or shoot.
Okay, it's getting complicated. I understand it, but it's a lot of if-thens here. So let's paint the picture a little bit. Can you simplify that a little bit more?
Yeah, like just to give you an example, you have 3 units in this great company. They are all within 6 inches of each other. One of them gets charged by your opponent. At the end of the charge phase, that one unit that gets charged, the 2 other units that are within 6 inches of it can then either shoot as if it's the shooting phase or charge if it's the charge phase.
So they get activated immediately.
Yes, they get immediate activation.
Right. I just want you to know this happened to me in my recent tournament, in the Triumph, in the finals, the final game.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I charged Nagash into an Empire gun line.
Oh, that was a mistake.
Well, I had it was just to go off on a little tangent here. It was a mistake, and it wasn't. I was just being ridiculously bold. Had a 2-up rerollable because I had Neferata's spell, so he was unrendable, and he was able to get his reroll because of his command ability.
Yep.
And he was Mystic Shielded. So I was like, you know what? I'm gonna waste all these guys. I'm gonna start deleting these units and get him off, so he can't score. And he just opened up with 3 fucking units. Can I tell you that he almost killed Nagash in 1 turn because of that? Because there were that many shots, and even with 2-up rerolling ones, that many shots, he started scoring. He probably brought Nagash down by a third before he started. He almost clipped him with his double Hurricanums right after that. It was just a ridiculous move on my part. And I had to run away like a bitch and heal up, and then he killed me at turn 3. I still won the game, but I just want to tell you, that's how fucking ridiculous and how much you can bring to bear with this combination and how cool it can be.
Yeah, and the other thing that I want to point out here is that I think this is going to get FAQ'd because it doesn't seem like this is actually how this is intended to be played. But when you're in that scenario, when you have one of the 3 units getting charged and the other 2 units activate, nothing in this says that you have to shoot at the unit that's doing the charging or countercharge against that particular unit. It's just activating them to shoot or charge.
So if an opportunity comes up for you to destroy something else.
Exactly. Like if there is a better opportunity, you can just shift away and do something completely different, which is really, really powerful.
Yeah, we've talked about this recently. I know you've talked about it in your video. It probably will be FAQ'd, but until then, the verbiage is the verbiage, man. Maybe that's not what they intended, but maybe they don't give a shit. So you might as well play it and take advantage of it.
Yeah, I mean, who knows? The other thing is that this is not in response to being charged. This is checking game state at the end of the charge phase. So if you have a unit that is mired in combat for multiple turns, and you have, another, say, shooting unit in the great company that's within 6 inches of it, it just gets shooting activations on at the end of your opponent's charge phase every turn.
Yeah, it's pretty serious, and I'm very impressed with how effective it is because I've seen it firsthand against, just something that was so well defended, even though it was a single model. I can see other units that try to. You've got to find a way to get around that. If you walk into that kill zone, there's very little that can survive it.
Yeah, I mean, especially depending on like how big the units are of like shooting that you have or what other things you're running. If you have like 20-man units of handgunners that are returning fire, that's going to be a world of pain that you're bringing on your opponent, because those guys are probably at that point, like the odds are they're like hitting on 2s, wounding on 2s with Rend 1.
Yep.
With all of the different stacked buffs that you get. So, I mean, they just shred things. I remember the first time playing Age of Sigmar that I had a 20-man unit of handgunners get charged by something, they just got turned into a red mist, and they never even got into close combat. The entire unit got wiped out.
Yeah, but that's early AOS. This is with this combination is scary. It's outside the order of combat of shooting. It's like a free reaction.
Yeah, it's letting your shooting units shoot during your opponent's turn. It's really what that's doing.
For free.
For free. No other thing you have to do other than having a unit in close combat. And we'll see with other combinations of things, like it's really easy to get a unit into close combat and have them just stick there forever.
Yeah. All right, let's move on from that. This is a fantastic element. Let's just end this particular element. We'll talk. I'm sure we'll talk about it when we go over your list. But let me just say this: this is an amazing deterrent from anybody trying to engage this setup if it's sitting on an objective. We've been coining the phrase with all these videos that we've been talking about recently, all the way from, from when we started seeing this stuff, the leaks from this stuff, through Vince's 5-hour review of Paint to Sewed, to even up to the recent videos in this one. The new hotness right now is not even so much alpha striking. There's a lot of talk about how alpha bunkering is a big deal. Being able to fast move onto an objective and then hold it. Now, while these lists are not going to necessarily be one-drop lists that can get you on an objective right off the bat, this is a list that if you can get onto an objective, anybody who tries to get you off of that is going to be in peril. It's a major deterrent. Just getting a few of these units into a position where you're gonna have to find a way to shoot them off, spell them off, but you're not gonna very easily charge them and make that work. It's gonna be touch and go, and it might even be, like you said, red mist.
Yeah, the big thing that I really think is important to point out about this is that the Free Guild Great Company battle trait is so heavily built around the things that you want to do in the scenarios in this book.
Right.
Like, it is tailor-made that just like pushes you in that direction. All of the individual things in this force don't look that impressive, but when you put the whole thing together with this ability, it's like, it seems like this army is just made to excel at these scenarios.
Well, let me just highlight something, because somebody in the Bluffer in the live chat said that he thinks it's OP. Let me give you some counters to why this is not OP. It is extremely powerful, but not overpowerful, but not overly powerful. And here's why: it is a reactionary thing. You have to get to the objectives and bunker on the objectives first. And one-drop or low-drop armies are going to get there first. Also, armies with movement shenanigans, like teleporting or coming in from the underworld with night haunts, or the Seraphon, which is now has a whole. We'll talk about that in another video. Has the ability to kind of drop in units, and there's a lot of units, fast-moving bloodletters in with the Blades of Corn, fast-moving units that can move there for however reason, but can get the early drop in first turn, are going to position themselves on objectives before this list typically will, because this is not a very low drop army. It's not capable. It doesn't have a lot of battalions to be able to do that. However, this is an army, I think, that can move those units off of their objectives. So somebody might score early points. This is an army that will come in, threaten. If you don't charge them, it'll shoot and wait and knock you off, and then it's going to have enough volume to, I think, be able to score those objectives mid to late game. Yep. And that's the key, and then take over those objectives. And a lot of games score high points in the 4th or 5th round, where I think this army is good. If it will be able to steal some objectives that way.
Yeah, and the other thing to really remember too is, like, this army has no protection against mortal wounds. It has no way to deal out mortal wounds, and virtually all of the units that can actually be included in these Free Guild Great Companies are movement 5.
Right, so it's going to be slow to get to those
you're inching across the board. You're really not getting anywhere very quickly, but they are a giant brick that is going to do a lot of damage to you when they get to you.
Yeah, and I think this is one of those few armies that really can move people off that bunker mentality on the objectives. I think they're a good counter, but they don't have that ability to just plop down in the middle of the field or get to your backfield in turn one. Yeah,
yeah. There's no movement shenanigans here. I mean, you have your outriders and pistoliers and demi-griffs that are pretty quick. You got your general on a Griffin that moves 15 when he's undamaged.
Right.
Other than that, I mean, you don't really have anything that's like really going to be threatening objectives in a big way.
Yeah, but that's the trade-off. That's the trade-off.
Yeah.
And I think it works. Yeah. All right, so let's talk about command traits. Let's go down that list. Why don't you tell me what they are? We have them up here on the screen, and then tell me what your favorites are.
All right. So first one is inspiring. Anybody within 9 inches of your general doesn't take battle shock tests.
That's bad.
Pretty good. Battle tested veteran. You basically get to use 2 command abilities. You can use inspiring presence and your normal command ability, or if your general doesn't have a command ability, he can use inspiring presence twice. These 2, I'm gonna say, are like inspiring is pretty good. It's probably the second best one on the list. Battle tested veteran, I'm not as big of a fan of. And the big issue with these 2 is that they are redundant with one of our battle traits that lets you reroll battle shock tests.
Right.
So you already have some battle shock resistance, plus the other things that your units can do, and we're going to get into that later on. Like your general lets you roll on 2d6 and take the lowest for battle shock tests with a reroll. I mean, you're going to pass battle shock most of the time.
Unless you take a lot of damage, unless you're immune, and if you take a lot of damage.
Yeah. That's the kicker.
Right.
Shrewd commander, you get an extra triumph at the start of battle. I think triumphs are like the thing that everybody always forgets that even exist. Like, I don't think I've ever actually played with one.
I have. You get a 1990 point list. You get a triumph if your opponent has 2,000. Don't forget that. It's one time in the battle, but it's a free one. It's either, I think, reroll 1 unit's hit rolls or wound rolls or save rolls, right? I think that's the choices.
Something like that.
Yeah. That could be big. That could be a turning point if you get that reroll.
Yeah, it could be. This is my favorite one though. Indomitable.
Yeah.
Add 1 to the save rolls of friendly free people's units within 6 inches of your general, as long as they have not made a charge move in the same turn. I'd like to first of all point out that includes the general that it's on.
Right.
And your both your free guild general on a war horse or on foot, if you happen to take one on foot for some reason, and your general on Griffin can both take weapons loadouts that give them a 3-up save naturally. So this puts them on a 2-up save.
It's pretty good.
That's really good. Especially since like your normal free guild general, if you're running him as the general of your army to be giving out hold the line, you want to keep him back. He's really not a combat guy, so he's not going to be in combat anyway. So he's got a lot of protection from, all that shooting that could rain down on him. That Rend 2 off the Arcanaut Company does not seem that impressive when it's only knocking you down to a 4-up save. Righteous Fury, add 1 to the general's wound rolls that target something with the chaos keyword.
Very situational, yeah.
Very situational and not that great. Grim Resolve, add 1 to the general's wound characteristic. It's okay. I feel like I would rather have, +1 to my save than 1 extra wound. I feel like mathematically that's probably going to work out better most of the time.
Right.
So yeah, I think Indomitable is I think that's the auto take every time. It's a little disappointing that we have something that's basically an auto take. But it's really good, so I'll take it.
Yeah. I'm going to go ahead and pull up the the next one, which is the artifacts. But first, I want to answer a question in the chat. Yes, Compendium. If Compendium is allowed in tournaments because they have points. There is nothing that says you can't play Compendium armies, Compendium scrolls. If it has points, if it's legal, you can even play the GHB stuff that wasn't included in the new GHB, the new General's Handbook. Some stuff has not been included. If it was updated, you got to default to the updated stuff. It's the most recent version. That's what most of the big tournaments, all of the big tournaments are pretty much going to default to. But if it's still in the app, and I would use the app as the benchmark, of course, they got to clean it up a little bit. There's a lot of errors still in there. It always happens when they have a big update like this. But if it's got points, it's legal. And unless you're in an event that specifically says no, which is stupid, there's no point in doing that. But I don't know anybody who's doing that. I mean, maybe some of the guys in the Europe are doing it, but I don't know anybody who's doing it in the US. If it's got points, if it's in the app, it's legal. So yeah, you could play it. The difference is, of course, the synergies have changed. So a lot of those Compendium things are not working. They can't be allies. They don't have free peoples, for instance. They don't have the keywords for the other sub-factions. They're really only usable on the Grand Alliance list. So don't want to get into too much of that. The key thing is that they're playable, but in a lot of cases, they're not as attractive. They don't have the synergies, and you're limited to the Grand Alliance generic lists as opposed to the sub-faction list. So that's pretty much how it works. All right.
Yeah, and I definitely would like to add on to that just briefly that although there were a few War Scroll changes, Bretonia is still really good. Like I could definitely see a list going to a tournament that is like using Bretonia as its core in mixed order. That is actually a really successful list.
I'm not sure how competitive it would be in terms of some of the top tier stuff that's out there. Same thing with Tomb Kings. But since we're talking about free peoples, it's worthwhile to talk about the Bretonians. The nice thing is this. And Vince made this comment several times right from the get-go. So I want to highlight because he's the first one that really kind of addressed this. They're complete armies. You don't need to ally with them. They synergize with themselves. They work well with themselves. They're thematic with themselves. They're just not going to play friendly with these sub-factions in any way. They'll work well as either of their own standalone army or part of larger Grand Alliance armies. But you're not going to be mixing them into the sub-factions with their allegiances. So when we're talking about free people's allegiance, we're not talking about Compendium. They're not on the allies list. Speaking of allies, before we get into actually, you know what? We'll talk about allies when we get to your lists later.
Yeah. All
right, let's go over free people artifacts.
All right. We actually got some really awesome artifacts, I've got to say. The Armor of Meteoric Iron, +1 to the save roll for that model. Same sort of deal as Indomitable. I mean, our Free Guild General and Free Guild General on Griffin both can already have like a 3-up save on their own. So this brings them to a 2-up save. I mean, I feel like with this combination, it makes me honestly want to take a Free Guild General on a Griffin every game with the Armor of Meteoric Iron.
Why not?
It got its points lowered by 20%. Was it 20%? 15%?
Yeah, we'll take a look at that when we get your list. Yeah.
It's down,
but it's lower. It's lower. Yeah.
It's a lot lower, so it's a lot cheaper, and it's just as good as it ever was. And people were taking it already anyway, and now you can put it onto a 2-up save. It's just ridiculous to be able to do that.
Can you get him to a 1-up? Even though ones fail, can you get him to a 1-up with these combos?
Yeah, I mean, you could stack the Armor of Meteoric Iron and Indomitable and put them on a 1-up save so that it negates Rend 1.
Right. So it'll counter some of the Rend to get you still to a 2. Even though ones will always fail if you have a 1-up. It's just countering the debuffs. Yep.
Yeah, exactly. Which in some situations it might be valuable to do that. I mean, look how like powerful Seraphon are for being able to ignore Rend 1 all the time.
Yeah, even if they have 4s and 5s sometimes, it's definitely worthwhile. Okay.
Yep. Blade of the Realms, doing mortal wounds on rolls of 6 for one of the weapons. And that's in addition to any other damage that the attack inflicts. So it's not like the Bloodletter ability where like you roll a 6 and it does a mortal wound and you stop. It's like the Skull Reaper's ability where you roll a 6 and you get a mortal wound and you keep going.
No, bloodletters can be adjusted too. Anytime you see where it says on a wound of 6 or more or a 6+, it's modifiable. But that's the beauty.
No, I mean that like the bloodletters, they do mortal wounds in place of continuing to roll to wound.
Right. I'm doing a corn video tomorrow. Just tune in 5 o'clock Eastern. By the way, for anybody, we'll go over that more there. But yes, I see what you're saying.
Yes. Luckstone, you can re-roll 1 failed hit, wound, or save roll for this model each turn. That's not that exciting to me. The Broken Shackle. The model can retreat or charge as if it can fly. In addition, this model can retreat and charge in the same turn.
This is huge.
That's really big.
This is like with the one from this Soul Blight that we were talking about with James the other day. Let me tell you, the shenanigans are so good.
Yeah, the shenanigans are fantastic. And, you know, if you're running, you know, a general or a general on Griffin with a lance, well, you're getting bonuses on the charge. So you want to get out of combat. You could like back out of combat and then charge back into the same one. Like, just to reactivate your charge bonuses. Let's see. Writ of Dominion. It's used once per battle. The model cannot move or charge or pile in until your next hero phase. However, until your next hero phase, you add 1 to wound rolls made for friendly free people heroes. Free people units within 6 inches of the model. That is really interesting. I don't like that it's once per game.
Yeah.
But being able to add to wound rolls is really valuable because there's not a lot of things in the free people that can add to wound rolls.
Yeah, it could be pretty key. You know, depending on what the situation is. Even though it's only once per game, that could be pretty good. But yeah, I think I see that. I would see that some of the other ones would be much more attractive.
Yeah. And then I think my second favorite one out of this list is this last one, the Flag of the Conquerors. You add 1 to the bravery of all of your free people units within 12 inches. And in addition, you can re-roll the charge rolls of all friendly free people units if they are charging to support another unit. See the Free Grail Great Companies. So it lets you re-roll your counter charges with your great companies within 12 inches of it.
All right, I'm going to go ahead and move. Yeah, go ahead. You're saying I'm going to move to another screen, but where were you going to finish your thought?
I feel like that's definitely really valuable. It lets you put like your more hammery units that are in your great companies. They can sort of sit back a little bit further and, you know, let another unit take the hit and then they can countercharge. And you can let them stay a little bit further back because you got that reroll on the charge.
Yeah, so we're going to go over your lists now, and you're going to also go over the battalion that you included in one of them. I want to go over the format that for all of these unlockings, for anybody who may not have seen how I've done historically them. Also, this particular run is going to be a little different. So I used to do these unlockings where I would ask guests to come on, or I would do my own lists with 1,000 point, 2,000 point, 2,500. And I don't want to do that anymore because I think most of the lists that people are running, yes, there are some events that do 1,000 or 2,500. There are escalation leagues, absolutely. But most events, and even most local just games, are static at 2K. That seems to be the standard norm. And I think that's going to be the case going forward. And I think it's nice to, just to stick with that and see what all the different options are as it relates to a 2K game. So with that in mind, I've asked everybody who's going to be coming on, or if I'm building my list in this way, to throw out 3 different lists, but all at 2,000 points. And with these parameters, one list that's just sitting within the sub-faction. Now, it could be the sub-faction, or it could be in the Grand Alliance. It depends on, the availability of if there, I'll be doing videos that are just on Grand Alliance lists, for instance. But in this case, we're going to be staying just within the Free People sub-faction with no allies for the main list. The next 2 will be allies. And they don't have to be any similarities to them. They could be going different directions. They can be completely revamped lists, but they're meant to just illustrate how can we include this great new element of allies into it that can change up completely how a list is and how it may be played and how it may address the scenario challenges in the new meta. So we're going to go dive into that. I'm going to pull up your lists here. You've sent me some really cool looking ones. And we're going to start off with your first one. I like that you named them.
Actually, if you scroll to the left, there's one more that I just want to go over real quick.
This one here?
Yes.
Oh,
so
this one is smaller. It's not complete, but I imagine there's a reason.
Yes, there is. There is a reason. So this is the minimum that you need to take the Free Guild. Oh, geez, the Free Guild Regiment battalion.
Right. I'm going to pull that up.
And, yep. And to have 2 great companies. Like, that's the basic, like, shell that you have to work out of if you're going to be trying to do those 2 things.
Okay, so this is good for us to go over. Let's go over the Free Guild company details, and then I'll pull back. I'll go right back to that list.
Yep. So what do you have to take? One of everything, basically. A general on a Griffin or a regular Free Guild general, demigriffs, Free Guild greatswords, 3 units of guard, 3 units chosen from archers, crossbowmen, or handgunners in any combination, a unit of outriders, and a unit of pistoliers. That is literally every single Free Guild unit, every Free Guild war scroll.
I thought that the war throng for the dispossessed, that battalion, was a little ludicrous. This is even worse, man. Holy shit.
Yes, but
not worse in a bad way. I don't mean not in a bad way. Good.
Yeah, it's crazy big, and I wasn't using it before because it was crazy big and it just restricted what you were trying to do and made you use too many battle line units, and like it wasn't that potent in the the old meta. So like this one I like experimented with a couple of times and never really did anything with it. But now it's interesting. So what does this do? Stand together, fight together. All of your units in the battalion get +1 to hit when they're within 6 inches of another unit from the battalion. Now note that your great company's abilities activate when they're within 6 inches of each other as well. So that synergizes nicely.
Mm-hmm.
So that when you've got these units that are working together in a great company, they're all getting +1 to hit as well.
Right.
And then the regimental discipline, this is absolutely fantastic. You get +1 bravery when you're within 10 inches of your general. And if you roll a 1 when you're taking a battle shock test, you automatically pass. If you have a standard that makes you already auto pass on a 1, you auto pass on a 1 or a 2. So let's just back up and look at all of our different things that are affecting battle shock real quick. We have a battle trait that lets us reroll battle shock. We have this ability that's letting us ignore battle shock for most of our units on a roll of a 1 or a 2. And our Free Guild General's Stately War Banner is letting you roll battle shock on 2d6, taking the lowest within 24 inches of him, which is most of the battlefield.
Yep.
So all of that together, all of the units, like basically all of your infantry have that banner that has that ability. So all of your infantry, if you stack all that together, I did the math, it comes out to auto-passing battle shock about 80% of the time. Which is just like completely ridiculous.
Increase the size of that so people can see it a little better. Yeah, it is. It's awesome.
Yeah, so this is just like the basic shell if you're going to run. I think that the magic number is going to be running 2 great companies. So this is just like the shell of this battalion and the minimums for great companies. So you need to have 2 units of Free Guild Guard that are 20 strong. So it comes up to 1,570 points to take, your one of everything, the battalion, and using a free guild general instead of a general on Griffin, so that we're just kind of min-maxing a little bit. So this is, I think, like, you're going to see this core list a lot. It only leaves you with 430 points to play with to customize the list beyond this. But within this, we have a lot of options because our free guild guard have 4 different weapons loadouts. Yeah. And those 3 shooting units that we have to take, we have 3 different options for each of those. So even within this, although it seems like it's big and rigid, you have a little bit of flexibility.
One of the ways that you can expand on this is in my opinion, that you can the objectives require you to have at least 20 models in the unit to score automatically. And if you only have 20 and you take a few wounds, you're going to be out of that realm. So yep. With a little bit extra free points, you could buy a little padding on some of these units if they're looking, so they can more aptly just score even if they take some losses.
Yes. So
all right, so we want to move over to the next one.
Yeah, let's take a look at our first list here.
Okay, and as you're going through this, I'm going to go and pull up the war scrolls for them. So I may jump off the screen. So if you're looking it off of the list, your own list, I imagine you have probably a second screen of your own where you have your list that you can work off of. Okay, so fire away.
All right, so what are we doing here with this list? Basically, this is a 2-drop free guild list. We're including the general on Griffin inside the battalion and a general on Warhorse that's going to be our general for the army that can use his command abilities. He's got the Indomitable trait and the Flag of the Conquerors. We get an extra artifact to throw on our general on Griffin. So we're giving him the Armor of Meteoric Iron. So that's going to bring him to a 2-up save. We're taking 2 great companies. One of them is going to be 20 free guild guard with.
Well, let's go back to the free guild general. Just talk about what he brings to the table before we move to the other stuff. Okay.
Sure.
All right.
Sure.
So
he is 13 wounds. He has a base movement of 15 inches. He can fly. The weapons loadout that gives him a 3-up save is the lance and shield. And actually, can he take a rune sword and shield too?
Why not? I mean, if you take a rune sword, that's an option, right?
Yeah, others prefer to carry a Sigmar rune sword. Great.
It says a free guild general may also carry a free guild shield to protect him in battle. It does not. It's not an either or.
Oh wow, that's actually really good. So then you can make any weapons choice. For some reason, I felt like the lance was the only one that you could take the shield on. Maybe I'm thinking.
No, let's read it. Many free guild generals ride to war armed with a free guild lance to skewer their foes on a charge. Okay, others prefer to carry a Sigmarite rune shield or great hammer. Okay, so that's an either or. But then the next one is an independent sentence. A free guild general may also carry a free guild shield to protect himself in battle. That's an add-on.
Yeah. So, this guy with Armor of Meteoric Iron and a shield, he's on a 3-up with 13 wounds.
That's pretty sweet.
That's really good. And he flies, and he's moving 15 inches. You get 2 deadly beak attacks at 3-up, rend 2, and do D6 damage. The Razor Claws, 6 attacks base, 4-up, 3-up, rend 1, 2 damage. And then your choice of weapon that your guy is actually carrying.
Let me highlight any artifacts don't affect the Griffin. You can't boost the Griffin, but still, look at those attacks and look at the rend and the amount of damage. That's a lot.
Yeah, nor do the battalion abilities or the command abilities, unless they specifically state that they do.
How many points is this guy?
260.
So let me highlight something. With 400 points as allies, even in a non-free guild list, in another list that allies with free peoples, you can pull this guy in if you want an extra behemoth with all this lovely, wonderful stuff, even without the artifacts. That's not bad. I guess I'll have to take a look and see what other sub-factions can actually ally with free peoples.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I am not sure who does.
Yeah, we'll take a look at that another time. No problem.
Yeah, the other little ability that I always kind of forget on this guy is his piercing blood roar. So in the battle shock phase, enemy units within 8 inches have to roll 2 dice and take the highest for their battle shock test.
It can come into play, especially when you're talking about multi-wound models.
Yep.
Yeah,
that can be really, really good.
Yeah, better chance to get that 6 so that one more guy runs away. Absolutely. All right, what are we up next? So, who do you want to look at next?
Do you have the regular free guild general available?
Yeah, I think I do. Let me go see here. I pulled them all up to Q. Is that him?
That's the one.
All right.
So there is, like, this is the guy that I'm always going to be taking as like the actual general for my army. It's really confusing, by the way, that we have like 2 different units with general in the name and a like battlefield role that's general. Like it just makes wording confusing all the time. Anyway, so he's got his stately war banner. So he can, all of your guys taking battle shock tests with the free people's keyword within 24 inches of him, roll on 2d6 and take the lowest for battle shock tests. He can take a shield and go to a 3-up save. He's got a decent different selection of weapons to choose from. The real valuable thing here is his command ability, hold the line. Up to 3 free people units within 15 inches get +1 to hit and +1 to wound. The only caveat is they cannot move during that turn. The important thing to note here is that wording, that it's during your turn. It doesn't say until your next hero phase. The +1 to hit and +1 to wound, that lasts until your next hero phase. The not being able to move or charge, that only lasts for your turn. So you can, with your great companies, give like your hammer unit hold the line, have them hang back a little bit.
Like which unit? It's not everybody knows what the definition between hammer and anvil is. Like which one?
Like, let's say you have like how I would set up a lot of these great companies. This is probably something that I should have talked about as well, as like how I think you should be composing these great companies is basically have a hammer unit, an anvil unit, and a shooting unit. So you have an anvil unit that is really highly defensive and is there to like take the hit for your opponent's charge. That's going to usually be your free guild guard with sword and shield. Okay. So those guys are on a 4-up save that rerolls 1s. If they're near your general with Indomitable, they're to a 3-up save rerolling 1s. If you happen to be also in cover or getting a Mystic Shield, now they're on a rerollable 2-up. So they can be incredibly tough. These guys have been my go-to battle line for holding objectives for like since the last General's Handbook came out. I love them. They are way better than people give them credit for, but they are they're your anvil unit, right? Like they're the thing that just gets hit and absorbs damage and sticks and holds. Then you want a hammer unit, something that's going to be really powerful on offense. So I would say either a unit of great swords would be a really good example of that, or a
good,
or a unit of Free Guild Guard with halberds.
Okay, I'm going to pull both. Oh, we just had the Free Guild up. With halberds, they're pretty good. I'm going to pull up the Free Guild again because they can be loaded out very differently. That's what's the flexibility of the Free Guild Guard is phenomenal.
Yeah, so if you take them with halberds, they only have a 5-up save, but they can take shields, so they can reroll ones. They're 4 to hit, 4 to wound, rend 1, and they get +1 to hit for when they have 20 or more models, +2 to hit when they have 30 or more models, +3 to hit when there's 40 or more models.
Yeah, that's nice. But isn't there a way that we talked about before that you can get an extra +1 to save?
Yes, with Indomitable.
Right. Nice.
So now they go to a 4-up save if they didn't charge.
And potentially a 3-up if you want to throw a Mystic Shield onto this unit too. So you can get these guys could be they could be offensive, sure, but they could be defensive just as much if you load them out that way.
Yeah, depending on how you load these guys out, they're either a hammer or an anvil, or you take them with militia weapons and they're kind of all around, or you take them with spears and they're still kind of useless.
Oh, yeah. But buy lots of them. You're going to be needing it. Okay.
Buy lots of these guys.
Okay,
I've got, I think, I want to say like 50 with halberds and 50 with sword and shield.
Sweet.
Great swords. These guys are absolutely fantastic. Attacks each, 4 to hit, 3 to wound, rend 1. They're 150 points for 10 of them. When
they're specifically a hammer. These guys are specifically a hammer.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. They are a really hard-hitting hammer unit. So they also get +1 to hit whenever they're within 14 inches of a Free People hero. So that's going to be like most of the time anyway. So they're effectively 3-up all the time. If they're in the battalion and within 6 inches of another unit in the battalion, they're 2s to hit, 3s to wound. Throwing 2 attacks each, and they have a 4-up save.
Not bad.
Yeah. So I mean, they are startlingly strong. That's the moral of the story with a lot of stuff in Free People is that they initially don't look that exciting, but when you start stacking all of the different buffs together, they suddenly start to get very intimidating.
Yeah, and there's bodies. There's lots of bodies.
Yes.
All right.
So in this list, I've got one great company that is running a unit of 30 halberdiers, 20 swordsmen, and 10 handgunners. And then the other one is running a unit of handgunners, 20 guard with sword and shield, and then 10 great swords.
Okay, so we looked at the great swords. We looked at the guard with the different applications that you can make. Let's take a look real quickly at the handgunners.
Yes. So Free Guild handgunners. These guys are very, very surprisingly good. Their regular Free Guild handgun, the stat line looks unimpressive. 16-inch shot, 5 to hit, 3 to wound, rend 1, 1 damage. But then look at our abilities. Steady aim gives them +1 to hit if they did not move in the previous movement phase. And handgun volley, if you have 20 or more in the unit, they get another +1 to hit. And then their pipers let them take shots if they get charged. So they get like the old stand and shoot from 8th edition.
That's not even with the detachment allegiance rules. That's just standard.
Yeah, this is just standard. That they come stock with the ability to return fire, which is really awesome.
Well, if you think about it, if with attrition late in the game,
yeah,
if you lose a unit or two, they still have the ability to do this.
Yes. the other really interesting thing too is their the leader of the unit, the marksman. He can take the long rifle, which is a 30-inch shot. Starts at 4 up to hit, 3 up to wound, rend 1, 2 damage, and it gets these same buffs. So very frequently it's going to be hitting on 2s, wounding on 3s, and doing 2 damage. But it's a 30-inch shot, so you can allocate that one shot to something else on the battlefield. Like, very often I actually use this to like snipe out heroes. And it's super useful.
It could be pretty useful. Can it target a specific model, right? Or is it just it doesn't have any special sniper ability? I don't see anything here.
Yeah, there's no like target a specific model.
Okay, cool.
But yeah, I mean, it's great for taking out heroes.
Absolutely.
Especially if you're running multiple units of these guys, so you have multiple long rifles.
That's right.
They add up quick.
Yeah, nice. Okay, all right. So there's different applications for hammer, anvil. What else we have? What else are we looking at?
So the other interesting one that I threw into this list is the Free Guild Archers.
Oh yeah, that's right. Let me go pull that
up. So this is, a unit that I wasn't including in any of the great companies, but it's because they have a really interesting ability. What they are able to do is, after setup, before, let's see, yeah, after setup, you can make a bonus move with this unit as if it were the movement phase. So you can run these guys out into the middle of the battlefield, like before the first turn, and potentially, like, in the FAQ it says that move in the movement phase, you're allowed to do a run move along with it. So these guys can sprint up before the game even starts and capture an objective.
That's very key, especially with this list, because this is a 2-drop list. Yes. So you could potentially vie for turn 1 and try to get an early objective. Maybe these guys can't bunker, but maybe they can get there and provide that buffer until you can reinforce them with something else to kind of maintain that that particular objective. That's a very interesting ability.
Yeah, and they're not particularly strong at anything they do, but they're a unit that like forces your opponent to do something about them. They either have to direct their shooting at them to get rid of them, they have to go charge them, or they're just going to take some shots from them. I mean, and they're going to be fairly weak shots. They're really not that exciting, but nonetheless, like if they're shooting at something with like a 5-up save, what I would think of is, the Caradron Overlords. They're units of dudes that do all the shooting. I mean, they can just whittle off a couple of units a turn. I'm sorry, a couple of models a turn. And if they don't, they're either going to be absorbing fire and keeping that fire away from the rest of your army. That's what is really valuable. Or they're going to just sit there, probably hold an objective, and keep whittling your opponent away a little bit at a time. In either case, they're doing a very valuable service. And then if your opponent comes up and charges them, now you've really like just baited them into a charge, and now on your next turn, you can countercharge very easily into them with one of your more powerful units.
Yeah, very impressive. All right.
This is, I think all of these things together is, looking at this army as a whole, it is a highly tactically oriented army. It is all about how you position and move different things together. I know that's one of those things that when we first had this changeover to AOS, a lot of the people that were really complaining about AOS were like, oh, like all the tactics of this game is gone. It's just a skirmish game now. It's just blobs of units moving around. Like, no, this army is all about really carefully, tactically moving your models around.
Well, the game has become, without getting diving too deeply into this tangent, but it's worthwhile noting, the game has become more of an elegant ballet between all of the different synergies, and some of the armies really work. That you have to keep them in with a certain profile because of how they play off each other with certain ranges too. And this army, first of all, it looks phenomenal when it's painted up. It's an impressive looking army. It still has that old school, beautiful color look that it always has, the old Empire army. But now Free People's, they need to work in concert, and it does look very, very impressive on the table when they do.
Yep.
Okay, so let's see.
Then we have the Outriders, Pistoliers, and Demigriffs.
You got. Let's do Outriders first, then. Okay.
Sure.
Because I already clicked on it.
All right. Outriders, I've had like this like love-hate relationship with these guys. Like, I love the idea of Outriders. I've never really had them work that successfully. I've tried a few different times. They went down by 10 points in the new General's Handbook, so it's a little more tempting to try and take them. And they're in this battalion, which I'm definitely going to try this list out and see how it works, or some variant of it and see how it works out. And the Free Guild Outriders are a really interesting option. They have the ability with their trumpeters to run and shoot. Their repeater handguns they're only a 14-inch shot, but these guys move 12 and they can run and shoot. Nice. So you can run them out on the first turn, jump on an objective, and shoot your opponent's front line. And they're doing D3 shots each, 5 to hit, 3 to wound, rend 1 damage. They get +1 to hit when they don't move in the previous movement phase. They get +1 to hit for the battalion. So, on your first turn, when you're sprinting them out there, you're probably also going to sprint them out there with your Pistoliers. So they're each giving each other that +1 to hit. Mm-hmm. So you've got 5 D3 shots hitting on 4s, wounding on 3s. That seems pretty decent. And then they'll be on 3s and 3s the next turn. And just like with the archers, they're running out there, they're grabbing an objective and making your opponent have an answer to it. They either have to shoot it down or go charge it. And if they do either of those two things, it's keeping heat off of your more powerful units that are slower moving, and it's potentially baiting them to charge up at you so that like you have an easier charge on them the next turn.
Right. Yeah, you can't ignore these guys, and plus everything they've got has a rend.
Yeah, like they get rend everywhere, and it's also fun to note that their sharpshooter can take a grenade launcher.
Oh yeah, I just noticed that. Look at that.
Which, like, I mean, I personally don't ever actually run him with the grenade launcher, but I mean, it's cool. It's like
cool looking.
It's like the engineer's pigeon bomb. Like, how can you not run that?
Yeah. Let's pour one out for the old engineer too with the pigeon bomb.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. All right. All right. Just a moment of silence and then move on.
Yeah. All right. Silence for pigeons.
Pistoliers. Yep. These guys are good looking too.
Yeah. So these guys, again, they can do the run and shoot. And they can, I think they can run, shoot, and charge. They have a brace of pistols, so they're only shooting 9 inches, but again, with the run and shoot, they're probably going to be able to get into range of your opponent on turn 1 with their base 12-inch move. They're 2 shots each, 5 up, 3 up, rend 1. And when they run, they can roll 2 dice and take the highest instead of rolling a single die to determine what their move distance is. The only caveat is that they have to move towards the nearest enemy model when they do that.
Mm-hmm.
And you can the leader of the unit is an outrider who can take the same repeater handgun with the 14 inches as the outrider unit has. It's like the exact same profile.
Got it.
So yeah, I mean, these guys are, I haven't had a tremendous amount of success with these guys, but again, they're in the battalion, and I can see them serving a function that isn't like, they can serve functionally if you plan right and use them the right ways.
Well, they could be harassment. They could certainly be a buffer. They can also be they're a shooting unit. They're a mobile shooting unit, so you can position them to whittle down your opponent and maybe even go after characters or any other vital targets wherever they're needed.
And they're great at baiting charges. That is something that with the majority of your units in this army being very slow, like your real hammer units being slower, it's important to get your opponent to try and charge at you. And if you have these quicker units that can race up and bait a charge, you get a counter charge off the next turn much more easily. So it's encouraging your opponent to make bad choices.
All right, then we're going to get to, and that's always good. That's always a good thing. All right, let's go.
I love making my opponent make bad choices.
Let's get to the where do I have them? The demigriffs. Now, let me just say, demigriffs have been up and down. They've been good.
Yes.
They've been bad, but they're always gorgeous. And they're just one of the most beautiful units, in my opinion, in the game. And they're iconic in terms of Empire, and they're iconic in terms of Warhammer. So tell me, before, because I just want to show a little vanity shot here. What do you think of them? How they stand with the adjusted points, and where they stand with the new General's Handbook? Because I know when AOS first launched, they certainly got downgraded from the absolute default auto include, but they were also a shit kicker unit in 8th edition before Age of Sigmar. When we moved to AOS, they got downgraded heavily in terms of their overall usefulness. They were okay even when the General's Handbook came out, but still kind of overpriced, in my opinion, a little bit for their value. What do you think of them now?
So here's the dilemma that we have here. They went down from 200 points to 160 points for 3 of them. So that's really good. The downside is that we lost the Brotherhood of Knights battalion, which was giving them an extra attack on the lance and on the razor sharp talons on the charge.
Yeah.
I was running that battalion all the time, and it turned these guys into absolute murder machines. So we lost that. We lost that battalion. We lost, we went down in points, so that kind of makes up for it. The other thing that impacts these guys is that new rules clarification in General's Handbook 2017 that basically buffs to units riding mounts only affect the rider unless they are specifically stated that they affect the mount as well.
Just to be clear about that, because I'm familiar with the rule, that's not limited to the character models, where usually a lot of the buffs are artifacts and battle traits. That's across generic units as well, like these.
Yeah, it's battalions, and it's command abilities, command traits, all of those things.
Okay, well, that's not such a bad thing. Frankly, this is a unit where I think the mount is much more effective. It's pretty common. It kind of be nice to kind of improve those, the rider a little bit, because I think he needs it. I mean, there's no rend, and it's only a 1 damage. It would be nice to actually have some stuff that boosts that a little bit.
Yeah. So the downside of this was that, when you got these guys into combat before, they're 4 wounds each with a 4-up save that rerolls 1s. So they're really durable. Mm-hmm. So you get them into combat, you charge your opponent. when a turn rolls back around to you and you still have these guys in combat, now because they don't have those bonuses from the charge on the lance, now they're much less effective than they were before.
Yeah.
But you could give them hold the line, and now they're +1 to hit and +1 to wound. And if you look at the Savage Ferocity ability on the Razor Sharp Talons attack, when it's a 6 or more,
right,
the wound, it inflicts D3 damage instead of 1. So with Hold the Line, you were getting +1 to wound, which means that this triggered on 5s and 6s.
Right, and it's a rend in addition, where the other attacks are no rend 1 damage for their rival.
Yeah. So that rules change is definitely a kick to these guys. I don't think that they are like the powerhouse hammer that they were previously.
But they're still worthwhile with the cheaper points. They're still worthwhile to put on the table. You can't ignore them.
They're still worthwhile for their points. I think they just serve a different role on the battlefield than they used to.
Yeah, they used to be, wow, you see a unit of these guys, even just 3 of them, they could really stand in there. They were so durable and scary with the amount of damage they can do. Maybe a little bit too much. Maybe they needed this kind of a correction.
Yeah, maybe they did. And I mean, going down in points and losing the battalion, I mean, I've had this conversation with people too about it, not to get off track onto another army, but like with the Skull Crushers of Khorne, right. People are like, oh, well, those aren't that powerful. They're not that good. It's like, but look at how many points they are. Like, think of what role they're playing in your army for the number of points and the amount of damage they're doing.
Right.
Are they worth those points?
Yeah. They don't know. Every unit doesn't have to be the most elite unit or a big shit kicker unit, or invincible. It's is it worthwhile to put the points on the table to fulfill a role? I agree with you 100%. Okay, what do we got next? Anything next that we haven't covered on this in this list?
I think we have gone through all of these scrolls in the Free People.
Okay, great. Well, that's good because we're only going to go on over new stuff in the other 2 roles. Okay, so give me a quick first of all, let me just say, this seems like a complete army without any allies, and that's one of the things I wanted to highlight, that you don't need to take allies for a lot of these sub-factions. Their abilities with their allegiance and with their battalions, if they have them, and a lot of the synergies sometimes works really well. And I think this is one of those armies where I think people will be very surprised that even if you don't try to fill in potential holes, that you could play a viable competitive army just with whatever's in that list. And I don't think, with all the stuff that may have been lost with Compendium, this is a very strong and very interesting and very flexible army. So tell me, how do you envision this? We went over this a little bit before. How do you envision this army, the way it looks and appears right here? How do you envision playing it with certain scenarios in mind, with counters to other things that are going to be hitting the table? I think the biggest strength from first glance here is that this is a 2-drop army, and that's going to help you get early. You can choose on whether or not you want that first turn or not. So yeah, go ahead.
So the 2 great companies, I would basically kind of put those out to have them each kind of zone off the 2 different sides of the battlefield. So have one on one side of the battlefield, one great company on the other side of the battlefield, and just kind of have them as your strong force to kind of hold that territory. They're the things that are going to be really going after objectives. They're going to be going after, they're really designed to be the thing that you're winning the game with. That by sitting on objectives or protecting objectives, capturing objectives, that's what their role really is. So you want them kind of half of your army on one side of the table, half of your army on the other side of the table, and they just slowly move forward and do their thing. Mm-hmm. Your general on the warhorse is going to kind of stay somewhere in the middle-ish of the battlefield, or move more towards one of the great companies or the other, so that the indomitable effect is able to work to give them their +1 to their save when they're not charging. He's going to stay back. You want to protect him, not get him in combat. as much as possible. Your general on a Griffin, he is going to be like your seeker. He is going to go out and harass your opponent's backfield. He's going to go after their heroes. He's going to go after their war machines. He's going to go after all of those targets of opportunity and just blow them to pieces. That's like, he's really replacing the role that I used to use the Bretonnian Lord on a Pegasus. Very similar battlefield role. It's more points, but he's got a better save. He's got a better profile. He's got better attacks, whole 9 yards. He's just got a lot more punch. The downside is the Lord on a Pegasus, like, nobody ever really saw that coming as the total shit kicker unit that he was.
It's smaller.
The Griffin is a little more imposing and a little obvious that it's going to come across the table and kick your ass.
It looks like a monster. It looks like a monster, Seth. Yeah. So yeah, go ahead.
The archers are going to vanguard up at the beginning of the game, and they're really going to be there to, bait charges, grab early objectives, be really annoying to your opponent. Another good way that you can use those is if you have an opposing army that does a lot of deep striking sorts of abilities, you can vanguard those guys up turn 1 and fan them out so that you have a big zone of area denial for all of those different deep strike, summoning, tunneling abilities.
And there's a lot of them. There is a lot of them, more than ever.
Yeah, there's tons of them. And the archers are really good at getting out into the middle of the battlefield before the game starts and just denying a big area for your opponent to be able to get that in.
This is an imposing army in terms of the volume of models. It's going to be imposing for you to paint as well, but that's the challenge that's worthwhile because they look so beautiful on the battlefield. I want to just, we should, if you have a picture of yours before we end the video, I'd like to take a look at it. I just want to, give a shout out to Red, who was my opponent. He's actually in the chat now, who was my opponent at the Triumph GT. Just a beautifully painted army with some amazing conversions. But in general, Empire armies have always been they're just very colorful. They're very fluffy. They have that old England, I guess Renaissance type, era look, but which is amazing that carries over in Age of Sigmar with the eons that have passed since the old world died. But the aesthetic is very pleasing and it's very interesting. So even if it's done well with a good paint job, my God, but there's so many models on the battlefield with this army. It's going to be a challenge to move. You better get some movement trays for that early stage setup, but and then abandon it as soon as you get into combat. but the point I'm trying to make is that you made a really good point. Area denial is a thing that I've been talking about since the Age of Sigmar first came out, even before the first General's Handbook, on ways to counter things like movement shenanigans, like summoning. That proximity limitation is still a big factor, even more so now, because so many armies have special deployment methods that can bring armies into different points of the table. And this army, just when it's deployed, is going to cover so much real estate that it's going to be very hard, and it's going to be easier to suppress and limit and neuter the counter deployment and other methods that armies have to bring units in within threat range or to take objectives. So just by virtue of the volume of guys, they have something inherent that a lot of armies don't.
Yeah, and just to give you an idea, like I just did a quick count in my head on this. This particular list is about 125 models.
Yeah, it's pretty imposing.
Yeah, it looks scary on the battlefield when you have that many bodies.
Yeah, one Achilles heel I see, obviously there's every army's got counters, but one thing that I see that it might have a challenge with is that, what it benefits with in far as the scenarios where if you have 20 plus, you can automatically take over an objective to score it in a unit, and if you have more as a result, you then own the objective. But even if somebody has like a more models than you, because they have multiple units, if you have a unit with 20 plus, you'll score the objective. This is an army that I think will inherently benefit from that. Yeah. But where it's going to lack is that it doesn't have a lot of heroes or monsters, and there are some missions where you're going to need more than just the standard 1 or 2. And if these guys die, or if you lose 1, then you're going to be under, you know, you can have less of a chance to do that. I know there are some people out there that abhor multiple leaders here, you know, having lots of characters on the table. That there are plenty of people that just love armies like this, but hate lots of monsters or lots of big models. That's the reason why the missions provide many ways to win. You have to have an array of all different types of models on the battlefield to be able to handle the various different scenarios out there. It's not, you can't have a one-trick pony. You can't have multiple small units. You can have lots of monsters only. You can't have just masses of troops. You need to have lots of different things in a 5-game 2-day tournament. That's what's going to separate the men from the boys, or the girls from the women. But the bottom line is that's going to really separate the better lists. You may have these one-trick pony or, you know, limited flexibility lists that can't function in some of these scenarios. And when you only have like 2 guys, even if you have the risk of losing 1 or even both and not being able to score on maybe 1 or 2 of these missions, that is the only downside I can see. But one thing I can definitely see is that people are not going to be worried as much about those dudes because they have so much other worries to worry about on this army.
Yep. Yeah. And then just as a side note for like the last little bit of stuff in this list, the Outriders, Pistoliers, and Demigriffs, I would generally keep all of those in a group together. Run the Outriders and Pistoliers out in front, screening for the Demigriffs, and, you know, shoot at things with the Outriders and Pistoliers, retreat them back after they get charged, and then countercharge with the Demigriffs. It seems like that would be a relatively good strategy. And it's a really easy way to, you know, jump out and grab early objectives with those as well, while the rest of your mass of 100 dudes tries to slowly lumber forward and get into position.
All right, let's take a look at your next list. Now, we'll be able to move through these other 2 lists pretty quickly because most of the stuff is the same, but there are highlights. And the first of this list is with allies. So it's a way to potentially try to plug some holes and give a little dimension, or maybe answer some questions that maybe the generic sub-faction or no ally list did not. I like that I like that you've named them. So this is your Swiss Army list. So let's take a look at that.
Yep. So this time we are not taking the battalion. So it gives us some more flexibility. It lets us drop a few units that are a little bit subpar and fill them in other places. Still taking a general on a warhorse with Indomitable as our general. I've got a second general on a warhorse that is really going to be more of a combat character and guy to go jump on objectives for the scenarios where you need heroes to jump on objectives. Once again, the general on a Griffin with the armor of meteoric iron, very much playing the same sort of role that he played in the last list. Mm-hmm. I've got 2 units of Demigriffs. These guys are really to be like your mobile strike force that's going to be harassing around the flanks and that sort of thing. Maybe jump up and grab early objectives. Then we have 2 great companies that are both the same. 20 Free Guild Guard with sword and shield, 10 great swords, 10 handgunners. And I think that's a more optimal build than what you would get out of the battalion list, having to use halberdiers for one of them. I like it a lot. It's really nice and balanced. You kind of have that nice mirrored effect that you have kind of things on both sides of the battlefield.
Mm-hmm. And then less stuff to forget too. Whenever there's even minute differences, it's very easy to forget things. Yep.
So our allies, I'm running 2 Hellblaster volley guns.
All right, now we got some artillery. Now we're getting back to old school. All right, so where is this coming from? I know where, but for the audience, for anybody who's new.
Yeah, this is coming out of the Ironweld Arsenal.
Okay, that's very key. All right, so let's go look at the Hellblaster volley gun. Okay, let me just grab that. Go ahead.
All right, so this guy's a little bit complicated. That is sort of the base. Its roll to hit is variable based on the table. You get D6 shots per deck that you fire. You can choose to fire 1, 2, or 3 decks. Then it starts at 3 up, rend 1 damage. Mathematically, I think it works out best if you fire 2 decks, so that you're rolling 2d6 shots. The gun will jam if you roll doubles. So on 2d6, you roll doubles 1 in 6 times, and then having an engineer next to the volley gun lets you re-roll jams. So you only jam 1 in 36 times.
But what happens when you re-roll? Could it potentially get to be a smaller number?
No, you just get to re-roll the 2 dice.
Okay.
So you're getting somewhere between 3 and 11 shots with this thing. It's going to average 7 shots. 3 up, rend 1 is pretty good. And if you really want to go for broke, you can roll all 3 decks and pray. But mathematically, you're going to jam 50% of the time, and with the reroll, it brings you down to only 25% of the time jamming. So if you're really in a pinch, you can go for it, but it's not a thing that I would really recommend. The math does not work out nicely for you, and you're not getting enough potential extra shots for it to be worth it. And it's a 26-inch range, which is really nice, which means it pretty much guarantees being able to hit your opponent's backfield top of turn 1.
Well, backfield, you think? 26? Because you're divided up 24 inches across.
Well, I mean, like, into their deployment zone somewhere.
Right, so anything that's on the line, you're going to get.
Yeah.
Right.
So, I mean, you've got a 26-inch range, and you can move 4, so you can hit 30 inches deep.
Right.
So, you're potentially hitting, pretty much anything that they've got there. Most people line up pretty close to the front of their deployment zone with most things.
Anything up at the edge of their deployment zone is going to be vulnerable. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think the only little disappointment with this is that it's rend 1 and not rend 2. Otherwise, it's mathematically pretty close to what the Empire cannons were giving you in terms of damage. Mm-hmm. But that rend makes a difference.
Yeah. Okay.
And then the engineer is really just there to buff the volley guns. But it's important to know that he also has a long rifle that, just like the leader from the Handgunners, so he's got a 30-inch shot of his own on 3 up, rend 1, 2 damage.
He's called a gunmaster, right? Yeah.
Yeah, he's a gunmaster now. The old Empire engineer. And he can reroll 1s when he shoots.
Got it.
So I guess that helps a little. But
it's also another leader hero type if you need one in a pinch too. But,
yeah, I mean, you've got to be in a really bad position if you're using this guy to claim an objective. But
what if you lost your other dudes? It could be the difference between winning and losing, man. But you've got him as a reserve. He's obviously serving a completely different function.
Yeah, exactly. He is there. He serves another function, and I mean, it's surprising how often that extra long rifle shot actually comes in handy. Because, like, imagine this with 2 units of handgunners. You've got 3 long rifle shots, which are basically like mini artillery. You're just sniping off. Like, with those 3 shots, they're all really good chances to damage your opponent. You can take out you can take out their general top of turn 1.
Yeah, that's a pretty good range.
Yeah. And then the last selection that I had here was a warrior priest on a war horse. And I know I've already gotten some flack from people for saying that this guy is good.
Why?
I am going to explain this logic,
Okay.
and I think it is very sound. He's not really that great, like, in combat, but he is really good for jumping on objectives. And he's really good when you're not in a scenario where having heroes on objectives matter. Like, he's great as just being annoying and being a thing that gets in the way or baits charges or distracts fire, any number of those things. So if you give him a Sigmarite Warhammer, he can take a shield. So that brings him to a 3-up save. He can unbind, which is something that the army otherwise can't do.
Right, and he can do it from the forward position too.
Yes, exactly. And he can cast prayers.
Which can't be unbound.
Which can't be unbound. And you might say, well, why would you want to do that? You have no other devoted of Sigmar units in your army. Well, he just puts them on himself. Mm-hmm. And, you know, his 3 options, he gives himself a 6-up save, a 6-up ward save. He can reroll failed wounds. That's not that exciting. Or he can heal D3 wounds. So in terms of having a guy for like an 80-point hero that moves 12 inches, he is really good for going and jumping up on objectives, distracting your opponent, doing all of those sort of little things that are going to help you out in various different situations. And he might be able to peck away at a couple of things with his attacks too.
Like I said just before, I think the Achilles heel from the previous list is not having enough characters, not having enough heroes. Yeah. This is an extra leader that you can, and there are a couple of those missions. And if this guy goes and takes an objective, you think he's going there by himself? He's probably going to go there surrounded by, maybe he's going to go up there alongside of your outriders or pistoliers, maybe the demigriffs, and then supported later by the move up of one of your detachments, one of your groups of ground pounders that are maybe a little bit more slow moving. But you know, he's a scorer, and if they're targeting this dude, they're not going after your general. You know,
yeah, exactly.
They're gonna have to split fire. So I don't think there's certainly a value to having the extra guy, and he serves a function. So I don't think that it's that he's bad if he's doing what you're designing him to do. Yeah. And
he's only 80 points. That's the other thing. He's dirt cheap.
All right. So I like this list. It's definitely the Swiss Army list. It has much more flexibility. I do like it a little bit better than the other list. It definitely still feels, because you've drawn your allegiance from really kind of more still Empire stuff. So it doesn't feel like you've gone kind of off the reservation, which there's some people that don't want to do allies or have problems with the idea of allies because they're worried about these funky lists. But even with allies, it's only 400 points. There's not a lot that you get for 400 points. Actually, I shouldn't say that. There is a lot you can get, but it's not going to dominate your army. In this case, I wouldn't even recognize that if I took it at first glance that you were going, you had an ally, because they just have the same aesthetic. It's the same old school engineers. Just out of curiosity, off the top of your head, what can Free Guild, Free Peoples rather, ally with?
They can ally with the Collegiate Arcane, the Ironweld Arsenal, the Devoted of Sigmar, and the Stormcast Eternals.
Oh, of course, everybody can ally with the Stormcast Eternals. Yeah. I think other Grand Alliances can ally with Stormcast Eternals.
Yeah, so basically, like, everything that you can ally with is basically the old Empire.
Yeah, so it's still going to have your look, your feel of old Empire. Great. All right, that's I like this list a lot. I just want you to know.
There's some potential interesting options for allying in Stormcast Eternals as well. I'm not that well versed in Stormcast yet, so I haven't included them in any of these lists. But I think there's definitely some interesting possibilities for throwing them in somewhere.
We can do that on another show, because that's one of the beautiful things about allies now. It has opened up the meta so much, even with just a small amount. Even though there's limited amounts, you can't ally with everything. But because and we don't, there's only so much time stuff that we're going to be able to throw on this show, and we're going to have, we're going to go over one more list now. But in a future show, we could do mostly the same list, which was with different ally options, and could be a completely different list. It could serve different functions. It could provide different answers to different obstacles and questions. So if you want to go and inverse yourself with Stormcast. And then we'll come back on a future show somewhere down the line, and we can look at a couple of variants on this list with different allies, whether it's Stormcast or whatever. I think Stormcast would be very interesting. There's probably a ton of options with what we could do with 400 points with Stormcast. But in the meantime, let's jump over to what you call the wall.
Yes. And just real quick, one of the things that I do know about Stormcast that would be really interesting to mix in here is you can fit a Star Drake in.
Yes, you can. What's the max on the Star Drake now?
I think it's down to 350.
Yeah, 350. So it's sweet. It looked pretty good next to these guys. Yeah, it would.
Yeah. And you do a little conversion work, and it'll look really nice.
Yeah, put all the Empire symbols on them instead of the absolute the Sigmarite lightning bolts. Yeah, you could, even if you didn't, you could just paint it up that way.
Yeah, and it looks like I actually made an error in this list.
All right, what should I change?
The flag of the Conquerors on the general should not be there.
Okay. All right, so we'll nix the flag of the Conquerors. All right.
Yeah. So here we go. This is a list designed to be just like highly, highly defensive. So we've got our Free Guild General with Indomitable. And there's going to be a second Free Guild General in there as well. Just to have another hero running around, as well as having a second stately war banner floating around to improve your battle shock rolls. You've got your general on Griffin with his armor of meteoric iron. That is, as you can see, that's like my new favorite thing to do. We're running two great companies in here, and they are both heavily stacked. So
the only thing that we didn't show here, we show the quantity of the purchases. We don't show the quantity of the guys, like how many guys are in that list.
Yeah. So the first great company is 20 guard with sword and shield, and 20 great swords and 20 crossbowmen. The second is 20 guard with sword and shield, 20 handgunners, and 40 guard with halberds.
Right. The reason why there's that 3.5 there is because you get a cost break when you take them at max.
Yes, exactly. You get them for cheaper. And then our one ally unit, the Luminarch of Heish. So this gives all of the guys within, I think it's a 10-inch bubble, get a 6-up ward save. It has a giant gun on the top of it to snipe out heroes. It's one shot, 3-up, 3-up, rends 2/6 damage. And then the spell that the wizard on the Luminarch is able to cast is actually suddenly really good in the current meta. It is, I think it casts on a 6, and it does D3 damage at 18 inches. But if the unit has 10 or more models, it does D3 times 2. If it has 20 or more models, it does D3 times 3. So in the current meta of, larger model count units, larger model count armies, that the stock is rising on the Luminarch of Heish.
Let me go pull that up.
And while your opponent is not in range, you can use that wizard to throw Mystic Shield on your guys. So yeah, the Burning Gaze goes off on a 6, 18 inches, D3 mortal wounds, double if the unit has 10 or more models, triple if it has 20 or more models. That is really super good. The Aura of Protection gives a 6-up save to all order units. Yeah, it starts out within 10 inches and goes down as it takes damage. And it also, important note, that it gives all wizards within 10 inches of it +1 to unbind, which includes, of course, the wizard that's riding on it. So you're improving your odds of unbinding your opponent's spells, which can be pretty valuable. But that 30-inch searing beam of light doing 6 damage, I have, with that, taken out my opponent's general top of turn 1 many times.
A lot of heroes are only 5 wounds.
Yeah. And even if they have a 4-up save, I mean, that's you're really praying for a 6 with Rend 2. So this thing is just really good. It's only 240 points. I think this is going to see a lot more play than it used to.
Yeah, it's a great value, and the alternative value is pretty substantial with all the things that you're talking about when you consider the expense of what a Hurricanum is, which has been the hotness for so long. And we haven't talked about the Hurricanum, and I just want to point out that we haven't seen a Hurricanum, we haven't seen a Stank or a steam tank. Stank is what the OG people call it.
Yeah, old Stanky.
Yeah, before we go into that, anything more you want to talk about with this before we jump off of this list? Because this is a nice different take on the other 2 lists.
Yeah, I mean, the real thing here that we're leaning on is that we have huge units of infantry. You're going to want to snaketail your infantry towards your general, so that they're always getting that +1 to save bonus. And this is just going to be a giant wall of guys marching across the battlefield. The Free Guild Guard in 20-man units, that's going to be leading the charge. You're going to have your great swords and your halberdiers off to the sides for counter charges, and your crossbows and your handgunners lined up behind them to do all kinds of shooting over the top. And then you've got the Luminarch hanging out in back, sniping things, giving Mystic Shield to buff your guys further, and dishing out that 6-up ward save. So the idea is that you want to have as much of your army as possible on a 3-up save, most of them re-rolling 1s with a 6-up ward save. They're going to be passing Battle Shock 80% of the time without having to do much of anything else, regardless of how many losses they take. And you've got your general on Griffin that is flying around the battlefield and beating things up from a distance. And then you have another Free Guild general freewheeling around and beating on things as well. So this is like the alpha block list right here. This is, to just be a really strong anvil with some very powerful hammer units in large size that are going to just rip your opponent apart once they hit the anvil.
The problem is that the alpha block that we're going to be seeing is mostly those small drop, the low drop count, 1 or 2 that are going to be able to get on objectives very quickly. I look at this as not as an alpha block, because I don't think it's an alpha. I think it's an alpha block counter. All right.
Yeah.
I think it's the alpha block that moves somebody off of off an objective and then bunkers that objective itself.
Yeah. It's
because you're not going to get there first.
The sheer number of bodies that are getting flung at you that have all have 3-up saves,
right,
and are dealing out ridiculous damage. And bear in mind that, your unit with halberds is hitting on 2s and wounding on 4s. Your handgunners are probably on 3s and 3s, or when they get hold the line, they're on 2s and 2s. Your great swords are 3-up. Even your guard with sword and shield are getting +1 to hit for their size, so they're on 3s and 4s.
Yeah, it makes these mediocre units really much more effective, much more powerful. Let me also say this, that the ability, and I'm looking at not just from the statistical point of view, I'm looking at it from the tactical point of view, from the tabletop, from the scenarios. You have a lot of units that are 20 even 20, even higher than 20, but a lot of units that are 20. Now,
Yep.
when you consider the scenarios that need the quantity, the quantity value to take over, you have a lot of ways to get there. But one of the ways that, again, we've mentioned this already in this video, this is something that's been mentioned in others, is that there's an override. If you have a 20+ model count unit and somebody else has several sub 20 but has more, you override them. You take that objective. That is something that cannot be overstated. The reason why I point this out is that, yes, you could lose 1 or 2 guys and some of those units won't be able to help you. But you have to target a lot of different units to do that. And you have a lot of backups that people are going to have to spread their targeting over to prevent them from getting that override. And by doing so, they're not going to be able to focus fire enough. So what I mean by this unit being able to come in and take over objectives, it's not just eliminating somebody off of an objective. As long as you can get in range, which is a whole other problem in and of itself, maybe you don't have to necessarily destroy that unit outright, but you can dominate them in terms of numbers and retain, after attrition, more of your units that retain the 20 or more model count, where with your attrition on them, they might lose that more quickly than you, meaning that in the late game, you could potentially steal some of those points. That's something that I think is, even though this doesn't look like this big models, massive damage, tons of wounds, crazy abilities, those little things matter. They come into play in the later part of the game. And you cannot discount that in the new meta. I think that we're going to be learning just how the new meta has those nuances over the next several months as we see more GTs, as we see more lists. And, you know, there are certainly maybe holes in this army like there is in any army. But I think that there's things that people, if a well-played list, a well-played army here can be very surprising to some of what it has been seen as the top-tier meta lists, and even things that we're even projecting may be the top-tier ones, where this has an answer. It can work.
Right. Yeah. My expectation in general is that, like, I don't think free people are going to be like a tier 1 army, but I think they're going to be a very, like, hold your own and, like, have a good time and have a pretty decent winning record army. Like, they're like a solid tier 2, maybe tier 1.5 kind of an army. Well, I don't expect to see this taking down GTs.
Well, it could. You never know. You don't know what the spread is going to be on GT. But, and you know, look, the missions are the missions. You play the mission versus somebody with, you know, it's going to be the general that's going to be equalizer. Certainly, sometimes you walk in, you know, you bringing a knife to a gunfight. That's going to happen still. It happens all the time. It happened at the last GT that I went to. There were some people that just didn't bring, you know, really optimized lists, and they suffered for it. Ultimately, what's going to happen though is it's playing towards the scenario. You know, you can like you know there are going to be benefits and disadvantages to these lists, but there's so many ways to build now. And the answers that you need to that you need to address to make the scenarios work, to score, are much more diverse than they are. They're not like they used to be back in 8th edition, where it was almost always kill more stuff. You know, yeah, you got a couple points from some of these scenarios, but it was about killing, which we've moved away from. That's more of the equalizer if everything else comes down to the wire, which is going to be very rare. Now it's about what's the objective? How do you score the objective? What are the tools you need to bring to the objective? What are the tools that you need to deny your opponent that objective? And there's many different ways over the course of 5 games to score. It's not just volume of troops. It's, in some cases, it's heroes and behemoths. In some cases, it's you know, there's different methods, and I think that a lot of them are quantity of troops. But because of that, you know, you're going to need some mobility. I think that it's nice to see that the Free Guild has answers, and it has flexibility, and it's not a slouch. It's not. Is it going to be like, oh, guaranteed you're going to be in the top table? No, but it's definitely going to give some. You're going to have to really consider what is in the Free Guild list and what's in this type of army structure, because if you're not, you're going to be very, very surprised. I was really surprised when I went up against it, and I knew a little bit about this army. And this is pre-GHB2, but I went up against this army, and I just kind of barreled through with a goofy list. But I could see even though the situation was what it was with in that particular game, but I could see the challenges it's going to be with a lot of the other armies that I play, and a lot of the other armies even that I don't play that I know about. How you're gonna have some challenges. It's gonna be an uphill battle. There's a lot of shooting, just a lot of lead being thrown, and a lot of nice flexibility and a lot of synergies with this army. Do you have any pictures of your army, just out of curiosity? Anything handy that you can just pull up?
I do not, unfortunately, don't have anything of my own army.
Well, I should have asked you beforehand. I kind of threw your wrench there.
Yeah, I could have like run downstairs and taken a couple of pictures real quick, but no, I don't have anything.
Next time.
I do have 2 videos up though on my channel that I just did, kind of like laying out my army, and like one that's like all of my like retiring former Free People models, kind of paying homage to them, and then one kind of going over my what's newly Free People and Free People allies, all laid out on the table. And I've got a bunch more too that were not included in that video that are just not painted.
Yeah, you need to get to painting, man, and that's coming from me.
I've got a lot of more infantry to paint, and I'm not looking forward to that.
It's a daunting task. This is I mean, look, I'm coming from painting hundreds of skeletons, zombies, and just large model count armies, and they're not even as intricate as these armies. One of the things I know about Empire is it's not just the model count; they're a complicated palette. There's a lot of construction to them.
Yeah, I mean, they're like all of like those Free Guild Guard, like they all have like an intricate shield. They all have like backpacks or like satchels on them.
And like stripes, different layers of stripes on their shoulders.
Yeah, different plumage all over them. They different kinds of pantaloons.
Yeah,
like they're like each one just has so much detail in them, and you can't just speed paint them, which is really disappointing.
Well, but they're rewarding. Once it hits the battlefield, they're gorgeous. All right, let's you finish it out, man. What do you want? What are your final thoughts on this army?
Final thoughts on this army. It is 180 degrees different than how I had been playing it before. But that said, it is in some ways very much the same thing. Like I always enjoyed Free People and previously the Empire, because it was that like Swiss Army knife kind of army that you could take lots of different kinds of lists. You had a lot of variety to take, especially with the allies that we have a lot of different things that we can mix in to tailor our list in a specific way. I mean, you can build lists out of this that are insane gun lines. Mm-hmm. You can build out heavy cavalry lists. You can build out like that last list that we looked at. That's just like an impenetrable wall of bodies. There's a lot of different angles that you can take to it. I mean, you can take an army that's basically all highly mobile stuff. You could take an army that has like 3 generals on a Griffin and just go rip through your opponent with behemoths. There's options out there. There's a lot of different ways that you can build it. It's crazy that we lost like 75% of our war scrolls, and we still have an insane amount of things that we can do, an insane amount of variety, so many different lists that you can put together on the table. And the core of what the army is and how it functions hasn't really changed that much. The big thing that we lost is all of the cavalry. I think that loss that's going to be a tough one to work with, having all the Bretonnian cavalry gone, having the Empire Knights gone, and the demigriffs being powered down. So I mean, I'm crossing my fingers that we'll get like little one-off releases here and there, that maybe we'll get more battalions or something like that.
Yeah, just everybody's still talking. Where's that Free People's battle tome? But you might have to wait a little bit for that.
We're not getting a battle tome.
Oh, eventually. You have to wait your turn, man. It's going to take a while.
They are not the sexy army that's going to get a battle tome anytime.
Be happy that you have a battalion. There's some of these just don't have a good functioning battalion to kind of have as their cornerstone, their backbone. The fact that you have the ability to play to a battalion that is worthwhile taking to provide you
Yeah.
with a low drop count. That's a big deal. And free peoples, the way you've built it out, you know, the downside of some of these secondary lists that you have is that they're giving up first turn automatically, and they're giving a choice of first turn automatically because of the volume of drop count. Now, that's something I'm familiar with. I play armies more often than not that are, 10, 12. I've played a 14 drop, and I was just like, your choice. I went up against somebody who had 1 drop at Adepticon, and I was like, what do you want to do? I'll just let me go grab a smoke. I will set up my army. But that's, it's nice that you have that alternative, and it fits. Anyway.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's great. And thank you for coming on, Paul. We'll have you on again. You know, you put out some videos. Please, everybody, check out his channel and Star Mini Gaming with James. Everybody knows Paul's the real star of that show. I know James is watching, which is why I said that. But you guys,
I am the Tom to James's Vince.
Well,
like, I'm always making us late, and I'm the one that has all the really valuable information.
That's a good analogy. I like that analogy. I like that. Okay, so you guys are like the ghetto Tom and Vince. Okay,
we are.
All right, cool.
But we both are terrible at painting.
Okay, well, yeah, that's a big distinction. Okay, well, that's great. Tactica Tuesdays on Tuesdays, most Tuesdays, not every Tuesday.
Yeah, it's kind of whenever we feel like it at this point.
Still worthwhile. Looking forward to seeing you guys next content, and we'll have you on again. Thank you, and everybody, thanks for tuning in. Tomorrow, I have being that I just got out of knee surgery, I have quite a bit of time, so I'm heavying up. I couldn't go to Nova, and it's Labor Day weekend, so I'm just sitting home healing. So I'm just putting out as many of these as I can. So tomorrow I have a 5 o'clock. We're going to be doing corn. We're going to be doing chaos corn. So
I'll be watching that one.
Yeah, it's going to be fun. And I've got a guy who hasn't really been in the in the scene, but he is. I think he's an untapped element that he. I talk with him a lot about list building. He's very good. He knows his stuff. He can stand in there with the conversations. And he and I have unfinished business. I took a tournament once, but he had to leave early, and so he and I have to. It's kind of like going to be like that Rocky Balboa. At the end of what is it, Rocky? It was Rocky 3, where they kind of like, we got to meet up. We got to find out what really happened here. We got to see who was the real champion. Because his list and my list, we didn't get a chance to show who actually won that event. In any case, tune in 5 o'clock tomorrow Eastern time, and we will talk about corn. And there's going to be a lot of more of these upcoming. Any additional ones that I'm setting up, I'm looking to set up a bunch of them throughout this week, maybe in the weeks to come. There's just so many lists to be to go over, and so many different combinations. Can't wait to see how these things actually start performing. So thanks again, Paul, and we'll have you on again.
Great. Thanks for having me.
Have a great day, everybody.